My name is Michael Avery, 55, and I've spent my life guarding systems, not people, not families, just the secrets locked inside computers. I work in cybersecurity for a biotech firm in suburban Ohio. I always thought my job was about firewalls, audits, and catching hackers. I was wrong, because the real breach wasn't in a network. It happened inside my own family. On my grandmother's 80th birthday, we celebrated with cake, cheap jokes, and a room full of relatives pretending everything was fine. I handed her a stack of what I called celebration papers, an old joke between us, silly fake documents I'd make her sign for a laugh. She smiled, signed, and everyone clapped. But later I learned those weren't harmless joke papers. They were property transfer forms. And when I looked up from my slice of cake, I caught her lawyer, Marjorie Wells, standing near the punch bowl, calm, almost smiling, watching every move like she already knew what was coming. That look told me two things. Grandma wasn't confused, and someone in that room was already playing a dangerous game. So I hit record on my phone, quietly. That recording became the first domino. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. This is how everything fell apart and what I did next. The thing about birthday parties in my family is that everyone shows up dressed like they're attending a photo shoot, not a celebration. Grandma's 80th was no different. The event room at the Westbrook Community Center looked like someone had tried to recreate a luxury hotel lobby, floral centerpieces, linen tablecloths, even name tags printed in gold script. Outside, a line of polished SUVs idled like the owners wanted the world to know they'd made it. I walked in carrying a box of cupcakes and a stack of what I jokingly called celebration papers. It was an old tradition between Grandma and me. I'd print some silly form, certificate of surviving Michael's bad jokes, or authorization to eat extra cake, and she'd sign it with a laugh. But this year her hand shook when she took the pen. Not from weakness, she was 80, but sharp, more from a kind of quiet defiance, like she was signing something that meant more than anyone else realized. She finished the last flourish of her signature, lifted her chin, and smiled. The family laughed. Someone snapped a photo, and for a second it all felt normal, but nothing in that room was normal, not really. I felt the tension before I even put the cupcakes down. My cousin Eric gave me a smirk like he knew something I didn't. His girlfriend Shannon laughed too brightly at every joke, even the bad ones. Aunt Denise complimented my jacket in a tone that suggested she hated it. And then there was Marjorie Wells, Grandma's lawyer. She wasn't family. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't supposed to be here. Yet there she stood near the punch table, posture straight, eyes steady, watching the room like she was reading a contract written in the air. That was the first prick of suspicion, a subtle tug in my chest, a feeling I'd learned not to ignore in my line of work, but I pushed it aside. This was a birthday, not an audit. I placed the celebration papers next to Grandma's plate. They looked more official than usual, heavier paper, clean formatting, almost like the legal documents I reviewed at work. But I'd rushed them that morning and blamed the odd feeling on my own exhaustion. I'd been pulling 12-hour days in cybersecurity, and sometimes my brain didn't know how to relax. Still, why did Marjorie glance at them twice? I needed to distract myself, so I pulled out my phone and hit the voice recorder app. Not for anything dramatic, I told myself I just wanted to capture the noise of family chatter for a memory reel I'd never actually make. The sound filled my earbuds, clinking glasses, laughter layered with tension, forks scratching on plates, ordinary chaos. Then Grandma stood to make her toast. Her voice trembled at first, then settled into its familiar strength. Everyone clapped, everyone smiled. Everyone pretended there wasn't an earthquake hiding under the tablecloth. I drifted toward the back of the room to get fresh air near the doorway. That's when I heard it, a whisper, low, urgent, behind one of the decorative columns. Owen Bishop, my second cousin, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't see me. Yeah, he muttered, we're locking the deed next week. I froze. The deed? What deed? Owen shifted his weight, lowering his voice even more. No, she won't fight it. The old lady signed the papers today. They think it's a joke. My blood turned cold. The celebration papers, my joke. We're all set, he said. Just keep your end ready. He stepped away from the pillar, and that's when the realization hit me. Someone had used my joke for something else, something real, something planned. And I wasn't supposed to hear it. Right arrow, what deed? Who is we? And what exactly had Grandma just signed? Right after Owen ended his whispered phone call, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. I thought it was a calendar reminder or another boring work email. But when I checked the screen, a single message filled it. Grandma's signing tonight. How soon? Call me. It was sent to Owen's number, but the sender ID flashed with Camille's sunflower emoji, his girlfriend. A bubble meant for him had landed in my inbox. A mistake, a dangerous mistake. My stomach tightened. My thumb hovered over the screen as if the message might vanish. Signing tonight. How soon? None of that matched anything Grandma had planned for her birthday. And definitely nothing she'd understand she was signing. I stepped further away from the noise of the party, pretending to take a work call, but inside the ground was shifting. It wasn't just the text, it was everything building around it. I replayed the recording of Owen's whisper, locking the deed next week, and let it loop in my ear. Every time the tone chilled me, calm, confident, like someone who believed the game was already won. Then more pieces slid into place. Small things I'd ignored, like last month when Grandma mentioned that Owen had helped her log into her bank app because she'd forgotten her password. Or the new questions he'd asked her casually over dinner. How much does home insurance cost at your age? Is your mortgage still active? Who's listed as your emergency contact now? At the time, I'd brushed it off as nosy curiosity. Now it felt like reconnaissance. In the late-night visits, Grandma said he'd stopped by just to check on her after his shifts. But why did he always stay just long enough to escort her upstairs, yet leave before she fell asleep? And the Audi. The brand new Audi Q7 he'd parked boldly in her driveway 2 weeks ago, even though he worked part-time at a landscaping company and had zero business affording one. Every clue was a small crack, but together, they were a fault line. Still, before I accused anyone, I needed to hear him speak. Directly. So I walked back into the event room just as Owen was finishing a story, making Grandma laugh loud enough that her shoulders shook. He saw me and opened his arms wide, calling out, Mike Seymour, man. He hugged me real tight, the kind of hug people give when they're performing sincerity. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You good? He asked, patting my shoulder. Yeah, I said casually, like I hadn't just intercepted a text that blew a hole in his plans. Hey, you mentioned something earlier about the deed. His eyes flickered, too fast for anyone else to catch, but not fast enough for me to miss. Oh, that. He laughed, too light, too smooth. Nah, man, Camille's mom is selling her lake property. We're thinking of putting in an offer. Family stuff, nothing serious, just conversations, you know how it is. Rehearsed, polished. Like he'd practiced it in his car mirror. Before I could respond, he turned to Grandma and kissed her cheek. Love you, Jiggy. Don't forget our movie night this week. Grandma glowed. You're such a good boy, Owen. In public, he was the perfect grandson, but I had my recording. And now I had Camille's text. Back in the hallway, I forwarded the message and a short clip of his whisper to Angela Price, Grandma's home caregiver. She'd always been observant, grounded, and impossible to intimidate. I typed, Angela, have you noticed anything odd, any pressure, anything about signing papers? Her reply came less than a minute later. Someone offered me money to write notes. I said no. My heart lurched. I typed back instantly, Angela, who offered you money? Her answer came in 3 words, you won't like it. Dinner at the birthday reception should have been relaxing: beef medallions, garlic rolls, sparkling cider poured into cheap glassware, but my mind kept replaying Angela's message on a loop. Someone offered me money, someone in that room. I was still trying to make sense of it when I felt a presence beside my chair. A soft shadow, the faint aroma of lavender and old books. Marjorie Wells. "Michael," she said, resting one hand lightly on my table. "Ms. Lane asked me to sit in for a bit. She said she wanted a familiar face nearby." Her tone was polite, professional, perfectly neutral, but something in the line landed wrong, like a note struck slightly off-key. "Sit in for what?" I asked. Marjorie smiled, a small, closed expression. "Just observance, birthdays, paperwork, conversations. Families can get energetic." That word energetic felt like a polite replacement for scheming. Marjorie had a reputation in town: competent, unflappable, sharp as wire. People said she could read a room faster than she could read a contract, and she could read a contract in under a minute. Judges trusted her, bankers respected her. Every time she blinked, something seemed to click behind her eyes. She glanced toward Owen, who was helping Grandma open a gift basket, but it wasn't a stare. It was a small tilt of her head, like she was cataloging interactions, filing behaviors into mental folders. Owen laughed loudly, too loudly, at something Grandma said. Marjorie's eyes narrowed, barely, but enough for me to notice. I didn't like that. I also didn't like that I suddenly understood why she was here. When she walked away, I pulled my phone out and reopened the photos I'd taken earlier of the celebration papers. I zoomed in on a section I hadn't noticed before. There it was, hidden beneath cheerful formatting and decorative borders: temporary authorization for transferal of property holdings for celebratory signing purposes. Legal phrasing buried under a joke header. A transfer clause disguised as party paperwork. My throat tightened. I needed someone who understood documents better than I ever could. So I stepped out into the hallway and called Thad Mercer, an estate paralegal I knew through a mutual friend. Thad was young, fast, and unnervingly good at spotting tax traps. When he answered, his voice was calm as always. "What's up, Mike? I need you to check something: deed history, tax changes, any pending transfers connected to my grandmother Margaret Avery." Quietly, he exhaled. Transfers can happen quickly, especially with elderly clients. If someone's pushing her to sign things, probate can get bypassed. You could lose a house before you know it. A chill ran up my arms. "Can you check tonight?" "I'll look at what I can, but Mike, if someone's rushing paperwork, they're doing it for a reason. Be careful." When I returned to the dining room, the family was laughing. Grandma reached for my hand and tucked hers gently inside mine, her thumb brushing my wrist with a comforting familiarity. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. I didn't have an answer, not one she needed to hear on her birthday. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail, unknown number. I pressed play. A distorted voice whispered, "Stop digging, some things are better left alone." My breath caught. Someone knew exactly what I'd started, and they didn't want me anywhere near the truth. Angela Price didn't usually ask to meet outside of Grandma's schedule updates, so when her text read, "Can we talk now? It's important." I left my office in less than 10 minutes. Her building was the sort of tired brick complex you only notice when you need to: bills paid late, fluorescent hallway lights buzzing, a laundry room that smelled like fabric softener and old pennies. Angela sat on a bench with a hoodie pulled tight, a thick spiral notebook hugged to her chest like a child. When she looked up, the weariness in her face made it hard to breathe. "Michael," she said, as if that name alone carried permission, "you need to see this." She opened the spiral and handed it to me. Pages and pages of neat, cramped handwriting: dates, times, short notes. Owen, 1:10 p.m. asked about landlines. 3:14 asked if Mrs. Lane remembers when house was bought. At first it looked like a caregiver's log, then my eyes hit a line written in heavier ink, steady and cold. Suggested confusion: $5,000 if you cooperate. My hand went numb. I read it twice, thinking I'd misread. Angela watched me with an expression that was equal parts shame and relief. "He offered you money?" I asked, and my voice sounded too loud for the quiet bench. She nodded, thumb worrying the edge of a page. "It wasn't at first. He was careful. He brought it up like he was being helpful. If things look worse on paper, the lawyer will do what we need. Then he said, I can make sure you're comfortable. 5 grand, no one will know." She swallowed. I thought he meant like paying for some extra care. He didn't use the words lie at first. It was slippery. Angela told me how Owen learned little details, what pharmacy Grandma used, which church friends called when the electricity bill arrived. He would sit at the kitchen table and make small talk until the house felt like his. He knew which buttons to push. "I'm behind on rent," she said, and it wasn't a confession so much as a fact I already saw in the way her fingers trembled. And he timed it. He asked about my hours, asked if the agency would be flexible. He made me imagine a life without debt. It was tempting. Her voice broke. I almost said yes. For 36 hours I felt sick about it, but I never took a cent. I closed my eyes. I'd heard things before that should have stuck faster, the Audi, the late-night texts, the odd questions, but their pattern only made sense when someone with Angela's proximity mapped them out in ink. The notebook was more than notes. It was a road map of the manipulation. "Why did you keep this?" I asked. Angela's jaw tightened. "Because I thought if anyone ever asked, I'd be able to remember what actually happened. I needed proof I didn't help him. And because I didn't want this to fall on Mrs. Lane's head alone." I took out my phone and photographed every page. The little camera shutter felt loud. Then I sent the photos, one set to Marjorie Wells, another encrypted to Detective Ray Hollister. I felt like an old spy routing evidence through safe channels, but this was worse than any breach I'd ever chased. This was family in the weeds. "You'll be protected," I told Angela. I meant it the way you mean emergency protocols, not a promise of utopia, but of action. "We'll document this, we'll make it part of the record." Angela squeezed her notebook to her chest. "I also have a photo," she said, pulling something glossy from the back pocket. She slid it across the bench. Zoe and Camille were grinning in front of Grandma's house, arms around each other, holding a bright printed sign, "Closing Day." Their smiles were cinematic, too perfect. The timestamp at the bottom of the photo caught the light, 2 weeks. My world narrowed to that printed date. I felt that old, familiar burn of guilt, how I had let work drown the watches I should have kept. If this photo meant what it seemed to mean, they were scheduling the take. 2 weeks was blinkandets gone and forever all at once. "Angela," I said, steadier than I felt, "did she sign anything else? Did he ever mention a closing date to you?" She shook her head. "Not to me. He said he'd handle the lawyer things. He told me not to worry, said he wanted Grandma to be comfortable her whole life. He said he'd make sure she didn't have to worry about the house. He used that language where love and entitlement meet, for her own good." In the distance, a bus sighed by, and for a second I could hear nothing but the pages in Angela's notebook whispering future consequences. I put the photo in my phone and locked the screen. We needed a plan, but plans require time and patience and proof, and there were 2 weeks on that calendar we didn't have. The spiral clicked closed. The bench felt smaller. I slid Angela's hand into mine because there are some promises that are just about not letting someone stand alone. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know if thank you was for the photos, for coming, or for something more primal, for being seen. But when I walked back to my car, the date on that glossy photo burned a hole in my head like a fuse already lit. 2 weeks until closing. 2 weeks until someone might lose a house, a legacy, a life. The law office felt heavier than the weather outside, too warm, too polished, too quiet. Mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with thick casebooks I doubted anyone opened anymore except to impress nervous clients. The state seal hung behind the receptionist like a warning. The state of Ohio, justice, not mercy. I swallowed hard. Marjorie Wells stood when I entered. She was dressed in navy, hair pinned back so tightly it looked like it could cut glass. But her eyes weren't neutral today. They held something close to worry. Michael, she said, gesturing for me to sit. We need to talk quickly. Her tone told me everything before she even opened a file. Something was wrong, very wrong. She closed the office door, then placed 3 folders on the table, yellow, red, and blue. Before we discuss your evidence, she said, tapping the red folder, you need to understand what Owen may already be trying to do. She spoke calmly but fast, like a surgeon preparing for an emergency procedure. Power of attorney, she began. If he gets Grandma to sign even a simple one, medical or financial, he can legally act in her place. I blinked, even without a capacity test. If she seems lucid and a witness signs, yes, she didn't sugarcoat it. Next, durable POA, that remains valid even if she becomes incapacitated later, very dangerous in the wrong hands. She slid the yellow folder forward. Trust transfers, property transfers, quitclaim deeds, anything unsigned but prepared is a red flag, anything signed in the last 30 days. She exhaled sharply. Those can be revoked, but only if we act fast and she still has full mental competency. I leaned back, my heart thudded in my chest. So what do? We file emergency protections, she said. Bring her here tomorrow morning. I'll run a capacity assessment, verbal and written. My partner will witness it, will timestamp everything. After that, we revoke any power of attorney or deed that may have been slipped in. Then we create a trust she controls entirely to keep predators away. Her voice dropped. Michael, we're in a narrow window. If Owen files something first, even fraudulently, we'll be reacting instead of preventing. I rubbed my face. This is insane. This is my family. Marjorie didn't budge. I've seen worse from families with less to gain. Before we could take the next step, my phone buzzed. A group text from the family chat, one I never participated in. This time my name was highlighted. Someone tell Michael to stop pretending he's the hero. Grandma's fine, he just wants control because he's lonely. Another followed, if he's broke, he should just say so instead of attacking us. My stomach twisted. Someone had leaked parts of my conversation with Angela. Someone twisted it into gossip. Marjorie read over my shoulder. They're circling the wagons, she said. Textbook defensive maneuver. I barely heard her. More messages popped up. Control freak. Always thought he was better than us. Grandma loves Owen, not him. Jealousy looks ugly on a man his age. Heat rose in my throat. My hands shook. Public humiliation had a sound, the buzz of your phone while people you love tear you apart behind screens. My voice cracked. I didn't even accuse them publicly, I just asked questions. That, Marjorie said gently, is why they're scared. I lowered my phone, ashamed of how much those lines stung. The law at least didn't care about popularity, but family weaponized shame like a blade. I steadied my breathing. All right, we follow your plan, we get Grandma protected. Marjorie nodded once, satisfied. Then she paused, a rare hesitation, and reached into her drawer. There's something else, she said quietly. You should hear this call I pulled from Owen's phone records, legal and court-ordered before you ask. My chest tightened. What kind of call? She pressed play. A scratch of static, a voice familiar, smug, far too casual. Owen, probate's slow, but if we speed things up on our side, the house is ours before summer. A man on the other end laughed. Owen laughed louder. Trust me, she won't make it difficult much longer. My blood went cold. Marjorie stopped the recording. The room was silent. There's no polite way to respond to that, she said, and she was right. I couldn't even breathe. Everything I thought I knew about Owen, about our family, collapsed into something sharp, dangerous, and real. Marjorie slid the phone across the desk. Michael, that wasn't the worst part of the call. The clinic smelled like sanitizer and wintergreen, that mix that always made me feel like something bad was about to happen. The walls were too white, the lights too bright. Grandma sat beside me in her blue coat, tapping the armrest like she was waiting for a bus, not a cognitive evaluation that would decide the course of her future. The doctor stepped in with a tablet and a calm smile. "Mrs. Lane," he said, "we're going to do a baseline cognitive test just to confirm everything is stable." Grandma pursed her lips. "My mind is just fine. I remember things better than my grandson here." She nudged me. "He forgot his own birthday last year." I smiled weakly, but the doctor didn't laugh. His measured tone made the air feel heavier. "Still, we need documentation. It's standard." Standard. A harmless word that made Grandma shrink back in her seat. I hated it instantly. The next hour felt like a slow-motion humiliation. Questions, puzzles, memory lists, repeating phrases, drawing shapes. Grandma complied, but she shot me looks every few minutes, the kind that said, "I raised you. I survived harder things than this." The worst part wasn't the test. It was watching her be evaluated like she was fragile, like she was a liability. Like she wasn't the woman who taught me to drive on back roads and stood up for me when the world didn't. My chest hurt just sitting there. And then outside the exam room window, I noticed two figures leaning against a silver SUV, Owen's friends, Chris and Megan. They were laughing, tapping their phones, occasionally looking toward the clinic entrance. Smirking, my stomach twisted. Were they here to monitor us? Report back. Or was this simply another taunt, a reminder that this was all entertainment to them? When the doctor returned, I braced myself. He sat down, crossed his legs, and spoke with professional clarity. "Mrs. Lane is cognitively intact, sharp actually, no signs of dementia, impairment, or confusion." Grandma sniffed proudly. "Told you." But he continued, "She is under measurable stress. Elevated cortisol, elevated heart rate, disrupted sleep patterns. The mind is fine. The pressure around her is." His eyes softened. "Whatever burden she's carrying, reduce it, quickly." We were handed a folder thick enough to impress a judge, medical confirmation of competency, test scores, signed doctor evaluations, and a time-stamped printed summary of her mental clarity. Bulletproof evidence. It felt like armor in my hands until the nurse stepped in with a soft knock. "Mr. Avery, you'll also want these for legal purposes." She handed me authorization copies, release forms, and a note. "Keep originals safe. Bring to court." Court. The word hung between us like a threat. As we walked back through the waiting room, Grandma grumbled, "If that boy thinks he can shove me into a home, he'll have to wait until I'm dead, and even then I'll haunt him." I forced a smile, but my mind raced. Why had Owen's friends shown up? Why was everyone suddenly moving at warp speed? In the parking lot, as I helped Grandma into the car, I spotted something near the front tire, a manila envelope crumpled just enough to look overlooked. It had a courier sticker on it. Pickup receipt was stapled to the outside, but what made my throat close was the signature, Grandma's name written in shaky, uneven strokes that weren't hers. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a stack of glossy paperwork stamped settlement papers, private. The delivery address was Owen's apartment. My name was nowhere on it. "Michael," Grandma asked softly from inside the car, "what is that?" I held the forged signature up to the sunlight. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't subtle. This was a warning and a setup. At the bottom of the receipt in bold handwriting was a note, "Pickup confirmed for courthouse delivery in 48 hours." Owen wasn't just rushing, he was preparing to beat us to the judge with forged evidence in hand. The blow didn't come from Owen. It came from someone I actually trusted, my cousin Drew, the one who used to sneak me sodas at Grandma's cookouts and cry laugh with me at bad Thanksgiving jokes. His Facebook post hit my phone just after sunrise. "Betrayal stinks. Some family chose money over love. Pray for Grandma." No name mentioned, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew who he meant. By the time I finished reading it, the post had 57 likes, 20 comments, and 3 share icons blinking like warning sirens. Aunts, uncles, high school classmates, people who had never once texted me suddenly had opinions. The comments stung, shameful, money changes people, some folks don't deserve family. It only took 10 minutes for the whispers to slide into my real world. My phone rang an unknown number. Mr. Avery, this is Lauren Hale from the Suburban Chronicle. Do you have a comment on accusations that you're isolating your grandmother and interfering with her estate? I hung up. 2 seconds later, a text from an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, saw some stuff online. Why are you messing with your grandma's house? Not are you okay, not what's really going on, just accusation wrapped in pretend concern. That was the moment the shame turned into something sharper. Not anger's clarity. If Owen wanted to play this publicly, he was counting on one thing: most people wouldn't know the truth. But I did, so I opened my laptop and went deeper. Digital forensics wasn't just my job, it was my home turf. The more people publicly dragged my name, the more determined I became to peel back every layer of this mess. I started with Camille's social media. She was careless, posting everything like her life was a highlight reel. Using metadata tools, I traced her luxury weekend trips to discounted heirlooms. Her designer handbags were knockoffs, tags from a warehouse in Florida. Her fiancé bragged about closing on a house soon in comments posted weeks before Grandma ever signed anything. Then I found the big one. Hidden in her payment app history was a transfer to a Shell account, $3,500 with the note, "Consulting fee private." The receiving account bounced through 2 out-of-state banks before landing at a tiny law office in Nevada that specialized in quick estate flips. Everything was legally gray, morally black. Meanwhile, the family was splitting like a cracked plate. Some relatives called to offer support quietly, of course, never on Facebook where it mattered. Others avoided me completely. And some, like Drew, doubled down on the narrative that I was trying to steal Grandma's independence. My name was becoming poison in the very town where I'd grown up. At one point, I sat with Marjorie and asked the question sitting heavy in my chest. Do I release the recordings, stop all this noise once and for all? She folded her hands. If you go public, you risk defamation countersuits. Owen's lawyer will argue context was manipulated. Your family will fracture beyond repair. Legally, you're on solid ground, but public battles get messy fast. So what do? You stay quiet, let the evidence speak in the courtroom, not the internet. I nodded, but silence felt like surrender, like watching myself get shredded while holding proof that could shut everyone up. That night I drove Grandma home from the clinic. Her house looked smaller somehow, like the rumors had shrunk it. We were halfway through the walkway when I saw a brown package on the porch, no return address, no name, just a scuffed box sitting too neatly by the door. I picked it up. It was light but firm, like someone had packed only paper inside. Michael, Grandma whispered. Who's it from? I don't know. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a single document, Grandma's old will. The word void was slashed across the front in thick black ink. And beneath it, on a torn piece of notebook paper, someone had written, "Stop now or regret it." My hands shook as I folded the note. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a threat delivered to Grandma's doorstep. And someone out there wanted us to believe it wasn't over, it was just beginning. Marjorie Wells didn't ask for permission when she called the family meeting. She summoned us, and everyone showed up because there was something about her voice that didn't allow excuses. We gathered in Grandma's living room, too many bodies, too much perfume, too many forced smiles stretched over trembling nerves. Owen walked in last, acting put upon, like we were pulling him away from something more important than the woman who raised him. Camille hovered behind him in her bright blazer, all angles and sugary smiles. Marjorie sat at the head of the room, legs crossed neatly, her legal pad balanced on one knee. She didn't wait for murmurs to settle. She didn't clear her throat. She simply lifted her chin toward Owen and said, "I watched you." Silence inhaled the room. Even the antique clock on the wall seemed to hold its tick. Owen blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marjorie didn't flinch. During the birthday celebration, Mr. Bishop, I observed specific behaviors that concerned me, pressuring Margaret to sign documents she did not fully understand, steering conversations, isolating her from certain relatives. She tapped the pen lightly once, twice. I logged every detail. A wave of whispers rippled across the room. I watched Owen's jaw clench. Logged, what are you, surveillance? No, Marjorie said. I am her attorney and my responsibility is her protection. Camille scoffed. This is ridiculous, but Marjorie wasn't looking at her. My observations date back several months, she continued. After a rumor was brought to my office regarding potential undue influence. Someone suggested there were attempts to alter estate instructions before Margaret was fully aware. Grandma's hand tightened around my arm. That was the first confirmation we'd gotten. Marjorie hadn't shown up by accident. She'd been watching them long before the birthday. I cleared my throat. Marjorie, there's something else you need to hear. I played the recording, the full clip this time. Owen laughing with someone about speeding up probate, about timing the deed lock, about Grandma's slow decline being useful. The room went dead still. Marjorie didn't gasp, didn't flinch. She simply nodded, almost to herself, like puzzle pieces she'd suspected were finally falling into place. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of genuine surprise at the coldness in Owen's voice. Even she hadn't expected him to sound that calculating. That's not me, Owen said, voice rising. You're twisting things. I was joking. You can't take that seriously. The room erupted. My aunt shouted. My cousin Sarah burst into tears. Camille rushed to Owen's defense, swearing everyone misunderstood, swearing he was the only one who cared. It was a collision of loyalty and panic, everyone choosing sides in real time. Grandma was finally forced to stand and speak. Her voice was small but steady. I don't want anyone pushing me into decisions. I want time, I want clarity, and I want peace. That should have ended it, but Owen jabbed a finger toward me. He's manipulating her. He wants control. Marjorie raised her palm. Enough. I am advising immediate revocation of any documents signed within the last 30 days. New protections will be drafted today. Margaret's competency has been medically established. There will be no further discussion. Owen's face twisted, humiliation mixed with something darker. He didn't argue, he didn't apologize, he just stormed out, shoving past relatives who recoiled from him. At the doorway he paused. Only I was close enough to hear the words he shaped under his breath. You'll regret making enemies in this town. I didn't answer, I couldn't, because his tone wasn't bravado, it was a promise. The courthouse waiting room smelled like old coffee, recycled air, and nervous sweat, the scent of people hoping the law would save them before their families destroyed them. Grandma sat beside me in her pale blue cardigan, hands folded, eyes distant. She hated being here. I hated her needing to be. We were waiting for the emergency injunctive hearing, a temporary restraining order, temporary guardianship considerations, and affidavits piled thicker than the morning newspaper. It should have felt decisive. Instead, everything felt slow. Bureaucracy moved like it had no idea a real person's safety was on the line. Across the room, the press lingered behind the glass doors like vultures waiting for roadkill. Cameras pressed against the frosted panels, hoping for a silhouette. Then Owen's attorney arrived. He swept in like he was entering a reality show, sharp suit, perfect hair, smirk too polished to be sincere. He gave me a look that said he already had a headline drafted. Mr. Avery, he chirped, ready to defend your intervention. I didn't answer. He didn't deserve the oxygen. When the judge finally called our case, the courtroom felt colder. Less personal. Owen sat with his lawyer, posture relaxed, face arranged into the expression of a misunderstood saint. His attorney started strong, accusations of undue influence, claiming I stormed in and isolated an elderly woman against her will. He painted me as some meddling grandson grasping for control. Owen even dabbed at his eyes once. He was performing and he knew it, but Marjorie was unshakable. She submitted affidavits, Angela's notebook excerpts, and medical competency records. She argued for the temporary restraining order with the precision of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for months. The judge listened, frowned, took notes. Finally, she ruled temporary restraining order granted. Owen could not approach Grandma or contact her until the full hearing next month. It should have felt like a victory. It didn't, because the judge added, "I will also accept Mr. Bishop's motion to review potential undue influence at the next hearing. Mr. Bishop may file counterclaims." Owen smirked as if he'd scored a point. Outside the courtroom, a reporter shouted, "Michael, did you trick your grandmother into changing her estate?" The cameras flashed. My name turned into a soundbite. We walked back to the waiting room in silence. Grandma squeezed my hand, not comforting me but steadying herself. She looked tired, too tired for this fight. That's when my phone buzzed. Detective Rosa Delgado. I stepped into a side hallway and answered. "Mr. Avery," she said, voice clipped, "you need to hear this." "What now?" "We searched Owen's vehicle, found a ledger, handwritten, looks like a list of potential targets. People he believed he could convince to add him as a beneficiary." My stomach dropped. She continued, "Your grandmother's name is at the top, next to it 3 words, close, quick, quiet." The coldness of those words slid down my spine like ice water. Owen wasn't just opportunistic, he was mapping victims, and Grandma wasn't supposed to be the only one. This was bigger and darker than we'd imagined. The note was wedged under my windshield wiper like a parking ticket, plain paper. Damp from the morning dew, one sentence in blocky handwriting: "Stop digging or watch what happens to those you love." For a moment I just stood there, keys frozen in my hand, the world narrowing to that one wet piece of paper. Cars rolled past in the driveway behind me, engines humming, radios faint, but everything felt silent, empty, too still. This wasn't rumor anymore. This was Facebook slander or whispered threats in hallways. This was direct. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all. And your words keep us going. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into an evidence sleeve I kept in my glove compartment, something I'd never thought I'd use outside of work cases. Panic didn't hit all at once. It came in slow waves, each one colder than the last. By noon, I had changed Grandma's grocery routine, canceled her church carpool, and hired a second caregiver for the evenings. I installed cameras throughout her house, only in legal, common areas: living room, kitchen, hallways, nowhere private, nothing invasive, just enough to track comings and goings. When I checked the first night's footage, I expected nothing but quiet rooms and the refrigerator humming. Instead, I saw Camille at the mailbox at 3 a.m. hood up, phone screen glowing, looking around like a teenager sneaking out. Another clip, Owen in Grandma's driveway, hand slipping over the mailbox slot, then pulling out his phone to snap a picture of something inside. These weren't crimes, but they were breadcrumbs. And I cataloged every second of footage, saving duplicates to secured drives stored offsite. I didn't sleep much that week. Pressure was building everywhere. People I thought might testify for us suddenly backed off. One cousin texted, "Look, Mike, I just don't want to be in the middle. I've got kids. I can't afford drama." Translated, they didn't want to be on the wrong side of Owen's anger. On social media, Owen had now fully embraced his role as the wounded grandson. Daily posts about family betrayal, inspirational quotes about letting go of toxic people, a photo of Grandma and him from 2015 with the caption, "Wish things were still this simple." Dozens of comments praising him, calling him strong. I wanted to scream. Then the fallout hit my professional life. A coworker forwarded me a message circulating privately. "Is Michael using company tools to spy on his own family?" Ridiculous but dangerous. In IT security, even rumors cast shadows. I had to sit with HR for an hour explaining the difference between legal digital forensics and company resources. I walked out with a warning: keep personal matters out of your professional workspace. Every wall felt like it was closing in. That night, reviewing more documents, I found something that made the room tilt. A wire transfer flagged by one of the financial monitoring tools Grandma herself had set years ago, sent to a rehab facility in Texas. Amount $12,750. Reference M. Bishop uncle. Problem was Owen's uncle didn't have a bank account, didn't have a phone, barely had a mailing address. Someone was laundering money through family names into a rehab facility in Owen's orbit, and everything suddenly felt much bigger and much dirtier than a simple inheritance grab. The threat under my windshield wasn't hyperbole, it was a promise. I stayed up all night with nothing but strong coffee and the glow of 3 monitors lighting the room. By dawn, the patterns started taking shape, faint at first, then sharp and undeniable, like constellations slowly appearing in a clear night sky. I pulled every name, every account, every timestamp I could access legally. Payment trails, courier logs, metadata, fingerprints, email headers stripped down to their routing paths. When you stare long enough at chaos, order eventually reveals itself. First, the money. Wire transfers labeled home care, supposedly for Grandma, but routed to shell accounts in Nevada, Kentucky, and one in Delaware registered under an LLC with a familiar name, CLM Collective. It looked random, until I realized the initials stood for Camille Lane Marketing, her influencer handle. She had created a hidden business entity funneling money under the guise of elder expenses. Then the images. One of Camille's trending posts used a picture of Grandma sitting on the porch smiling at the camera, unaware. But the metadata revealed the photo had been uploaded from a staging app used for legacy planning ads. Camille was positioning Grandma as part of a campaign without consent to push some fake family narrative brand. My hands shook as I scrolled. And then the whistleblower. A bank employee reached out through a secure inbox, anonymous, careful with their words. 3 withdrawals flagged as unusual, marked for home care. Funds actually routed to unverified third-party entities. Be careful, someone is using caretaker codes they shouldn't have. They had no reason to help me, but something about the pattern must have looked wrong enough for them to risk a message. The evidence pile was enormous, airtight. But messy, too many strands pointing in the same direction, not enough showing a single, clear smoking gun. The prosecutor kept saying the same thing. We need intent, Michael, direct intent. Intent. Owen had certainly implied it, but the law didn't go after implications, it went after proof. Meanwhile, Owen and Camille deployed every delay tactic known to man. Continuance requests, challenges to evidence admissibility, claims of privacy invasion. Their lawyer hinted publicly that I was unstable, that I was obsessed with control, that I was manufacturing drama. And the family, they weren't just divided, they were bleeding. Some relatives posted jabs in comment threads under news stories. One wrote, "Sad when a grandson tries to become a hero by tearing down his own kin." Grandma saw some of it. I could tell by the way she stared at her tea longer than usual. One night she asked, voice thin and tired, "Michael, will this ever end?" I didn't have the courage to lie. "I don't know," I whispered, "but I'm not letting go." Then, just when it felt like we were inching toward clarity, the doorbell rang the next morning. A courier handed me an envelope stamped urgent court filing. Inside was a document from Owen's attorney claiming Grandma had signed paperwork at the courthouse 2 weeks earlier, paperwork transferring temporary decision rights, witnessed by neutral parties. Except Grandma had been at home that entire day. We had her caregiver logs, we had security cam timestamps. And none of us, not Marjorie, not me, not the court clerk, had ever seen these documents before. Someone wasn't just forging signatures, they were forging court filings. The game had changed, and the stakes had just exploded. We planned it like a sting, but honestly, it was also a gamble, part strategy, part raw desperation. The meeting spot was a quiet coffee shop near the courthouse, a place with warm lights, soft jazz, and just enough foot traffic to keep things calm. If Owen wanted to finalize anything, this was his chance, and if he took the bait, we'd finally see what he'd been hiding. Marjorie coordinated everything with Detective Delgado. Two plainclothes officers sat near the exit pretending to work on laptops. Thad arrived early with a neat stack of notarized documents and two neutral witnesses sipping cappuccinos like extras in a play. I came last, guiding Grandma gently into her seat. My phone was already recording inside my jacket pocket. Owen and Camille walked in 5 minutes late, confident, overdressed, and wearing identical smirks. Camille winked at the barista for no reason. Owen carried a leather folder like he was closing $1 million merger. He slid into the chair opposite us. "Let's get this done," he said, voice low and sharp. "It's what Grandma wanted." I didn't respond, neither did Grandma. Instead, Marjorie placed a neutral document on the table, a simple verification form. "We need signatures to confirm intent before any changes," she said calmly. "Standard procedure." Owen reached for it impatient. That was the moment Detective Delgado stood up. "Mr. Bishop," she said, flashing her badge just long enough, "we need to review the documents in your possession." It wasn't dramatic, nobody shouted. Nobody ran, the officers simply stepped in, one blocking the door, the other collecting Owen's folder and the backpack he tried to nudge under his chair. Owen sputtered. "This is harassment, I didn't do anything," but the shakiness in his voice gave him away. Inside his backpack were exactly what we feared: fake power of attorney forms, pre-filled courier slips, copies of forged signatures, including Grandma's, a printed checklist titled "Steps Before Transfer." His confidence cracked down the middle. Outside, officers questioned him by the patrol car while Camille paced, furious. Then Owen snapped. He turned toward me, face flushed, and shouted, "You think this is over? This is a warning. I'll take you down." But it wasn't me he stared at, it was Grandma. She didn't flinch. Didn't recoil, didn't even blink. Instead, she smiled a small, knowing smile and leaned toward me. "I knew more than I said," she whispered, my breath caught. What had she done? The courtroom felt colder than usual when the judge returned with the decision. No one whispered, no one shifted, even the air seemed to wait. "The court grants a permanent restraining order," Judge Harlan said, a pause. "Owen Bishop will receive a token inheritance of $1. Sanctions are imposed for fraudulent filings and attempted undue influence." The gavel fell like a final heartbeat, and just like that it was over, not with shouting, not with handcuffs, but with a quiet that felt heavier than any noise. Owen stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, face drained of all the confidence he'd worn like cologne. Camille wasn't beside him. She hadn't shown up for the last 3 hearings. Word around town was she'd left for Florida the week before, leaving behind a trail of rented handbags and unpaid bills. When Grandma and I stepped outside into the winter sunlight, she inhaled like someone tasting freedom again. "Let's go home," she said. The family didn't heal overnight. Parts of it never healed at all. Some cousins kept their distance, still hurt by the secrecy. A few apologized quietly, ashamed of siding with Owen during the smear campaign. Most just faded into holiday card-only relationships. I learned something the hard way: vindication doesn't repair every bond. Just clears the air enough to breathe again. Grandma moved back into her house, guarded, observant, but peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. She cooked more. She joined a knitting group again. She even added motion lights and new locks, joking that spies need good home security. For my part, I kept my promise to myself. A portion of the estate, the part she insisted I take, went into creating a fund for caregivers like Angela, the ones who face pressure and temptation without support. Another portion went to elder advocacy groups fighting financial exploitation. It felt right, it felt needed. The news finally shifted too. After the verdict, headlines changed from grandson accused of interfering with estate to elder financial abuse stopped by protective family member. Vindication in print is strange, it feels good, but it doesn't erase the late nights, the threats, the humiliation. Owen's appeal sputtered out after 2 months. By spring, he filed for bankruptcy. Last I heard, he moved 2 counties over and lived with an uncle who owed more favors than rent. I never wished suffering on him, but I hoped he finally saw the truth he'd tried to twist. Greed always costs more than it pays. The final moment came on a soft April evening, just me and Grandma on her porch. The sky was pink, the air warm, and the world felt almost whole. She handed me the last surviving celebration paper, the fake form she'd signed on her birthday. "Keep it," she said. Reminder that even the smallest page can reveal the biggest truths. I held it carefully, feeling its weight, thin paper, heavy history. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I thought about everything we'd survived, not just legal battles, but the messiness of family, the cracks in loyalty, the fear of losing the people we love. And in that quiet, I learned this: showing up matters, documenting the truth matters, protecting with love and boundaries matters most of all. If your gut whispers, listen. If something feels off, record it. If someone you love is vulnerable, stand between them and the storm. And if this story moved you, subscribe. Next time, I'll tell you the exact words, the exact documents, and the exact cameras that saved my grandmother's life.